Hi, I'm Cash with CashedOutCars, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to replace your valve cover gasket on a Miata. So this tutorial is going to be good for a 1.6 liter or a 1.8 liter Miata. So if you have an NA or an NB, this tutorial will be good for you. So you might want to replace your valve cover gasket if you see oil leaking around the bottom of your valve cover, or if you just want to be safe and have an old car and want to replace it. So with all that said, let's jump right into this video and show you how to replace your valve cover gasket on a Miata. The first thing that you need to do is to remove a couple lines from your valve cover. There are a couple vacuum lines that run to it. There's this one here, and then there's this one over here. And to do this, all you need is some pliers, and you want to squeeze that clip and pull it off gently. You want to be very careful with this stuff, especially the older that your car is, because this stuff will get brittle and be very easy to break, and obviously you don't want to break it. So I'm going to make an attempt here to pull this off without breaking it. Got the clamp loose, wiggling it free here. And there we go. The one on this other side is going to be the same process. And there we go, that one is now off too. Then you could go ahead and carefully pop out all of your spark plug wires. And this is very easy. You just need to grip the top of it, wiggle it maybe a little bit, and pull it straight up, and they'll pop out of place here. Be careful with them so you don't damage them, of course, but it's a pretty simple process that's basically just pulling them up as I'm showing here. And then that's all set. Next, we'll need to remove all of this hardware that's holding the valve cover on. These are all 10mm fasteners, and you got a bunch of them around the valve cover as well as a couple down the center there. So it's not hard. Like I said, they're all 10mm, and basically you just need to back them all out. You could crack them all loose evenly so you don't risk breaking anything, even though that's more important when tightening them down. But still, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to crack everything loose and then pull them all the way out. To get these ones in the center here and on the other side, it might be easier to use an extension like I'm doing here. This just gives you a little bit of extra reach to get over the parts that stick up on the valve cover. And now everything is cracked loose, so I could go ahead and take those all the way out. Do note where certain things go. As you can see, these are slightly different fasteners than the rest. I don't know if that's factory, but that's how it is on my car. The next thing you'll want to do is to take off this 12mm bolt and this 12mm bolt that's back there, and then you'll be able to lift the valve cover up out of the way and see what's under it, and then get ready to replace your gasket. Alright, now we can go ahead and get this out of the way, once again carefully, and then this valve cover should just lift up here. We might need a little bit of coaxing on it. I can feel it starting to release. So right now I'm just extremely carefully using a screwdriver to pry up the valve cover. Ideally you want to use something very soft here so you don't risk nicking the aluminum of the valve cover and making it so it can't seal. But that's what I had. It worked to just crack it loose there. And now we can lift this thing up and get it off. And there we go, guys. One thing to note here that I certainly could have done a little bit differently and better is I should have put these wires out of the way so they didn't get all oily. So I'm going to pop these up here and then wipe the oil off of them, and they'll be good to go. I didn't do any harm to them, but just as a precaution you could do that. And also I have a little bit of oil that I got on my timing belt here, and I'm just going to wipe that off to prevent any potential issues, and you don't want that thing too slippery. Now is also a great opportunity to inspect your timing belt and to look at the inside of your engine to make sure that nothing abnormal is going on here. My engine, I believe, has 215,000 miles, and it doesn't really look like any of these cams are worn at all. I don't see any metal flakes or metal chunks or anything out of the ordinary in there, so that's all good. With that said, now I'm going to cover this thing up as I work on my valve cover over there, because I am going to be painting mine and replacing the gasket. And I'm just covering the top of my engine so nothing falls in there that could cause harm to it. The next thing to do is to go around your cover and scrape out any of the old gasket that might have got left behind. Sometimes people like to seal in their gaskets with a lot of gasket sealer, but you don't really need that if your surface is clean. So here I'm just going around and scraping out as much of the old gasket and sealant as possible, and then I'll go ahead and reinstall my new gasket. And now that I've got everything loosened up, I'm just going around with a paper towel to help pull everything out. Now we could go ahead and install our new gasket here. It's pretty self-explanatory about which way it goes, even though it might look a little bit confusing when you first pick the thing up. Basically, there's one way that this could go, since this is an asymmetrical valve cover, and you'll be able to tell once you start to actually put the valve cover in place which way it goes. So I'm just going to get it in place here, basically just put it in the groove and press it down, and then your cover will be all set to go into your car. Now, some people do recommend using valve cover gasket sealants on stuff like this, but I'm going to try it without it and see if it doesn't leak. The places that most people recommend it is in the corners there, where things might not match up, but since this is a brand new gasket and I just cleaned the surface, I think we should be in pretty good shape to just put this gasket in here, torque the valve cover down to the proper spec, and be all set to go with it. I have a link to where you could get a brand new gasket for your car in the description below, so if you want to support the channel and get a valve cover gasket for your car, please go through that. The next thing to do is to basically clean up the same sealing surface on the engine as you just did on your valve cover. So I'm going to go around and just wipe and scrape any additional crap that's on the sealing surface on the head of this engine. So there, I got the valve cover back in place very carefully and with clean hands to make sure that I didn't get any crap on the gasket where I shouldn't have. Now I'm going ahead and unmasking everything on the valve cover that I had masked up, and then we could begin reinstalling everything, hardware and lines to the valve cover gasket. So now the valve cover is back in place, and we need to carefully torque down all of those different valve cover bolts. There's a very specific pattern that you have to use in order to do this, and do note that you have to torque these down to 6 foot-pounds or about 78 inch-pounds. Now be careful to not do 78 foot-pounds, because then you're going to be breaking bolts left and right and you're going to have a bad time. Alright, now that's all torqued down, and we have to get our vacuum lines back in place and get our plug wire holders back in place and get the plugs back in place, and this install is done. So guys, that is going to wrap up this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you found it helpful. Now, I did paint my valve cover during this process, and the paint came out pretty good, and it looks great from a bit of a distance, but it's not perfect up close, so I may or may not make a video on it. Let me know if you want to see a video on it. If you don't, there are plenty of other good tutorials on painting valve covers out there. And with all that said, like this video if you liked it, leave any comments you have down below, and subscribe. I hope to see you at the next one.